The dream of the neighborhood bakery is one of the most dangerous manufacturing traps you can enter. While you focus on the smell of fresh croissants, your real enemy is a brutal reality where retail shops often struggle to maintain 3% net profit. Most owners fail because they treat their shop like a passion project when it is actually a high-stakes, low-margin numbers game. You are not just selling flour and water. You are managing a perfect storm of rising ingredient costs, skilled labor shortages, and immense pressure from food waste. These are not isolated hurdles. They are the structural walls of your new world. When you open those doors, you aren't just starting a business. You are entering a race against depreciation and expiration. Your local shop often fails because of the mathematical disparity between its fixed overhead, which accounts for 20 to 35% of total costs, and the high-risk reality of a perishable goods model. While you envision a community hub, the ledger tracks a facility where rent, utilities, and administrative fees consume your capital before you even crack an egg. While home-based models can maintain net profit margins near 25% by bypassing commercial overhead, your high-rent retail storefront might struggle to scrape together 3%. The math demands a precision that passion cannot provide. You see the storefront as a customer, but you are not yet seeing the machine hidden behind the register. To understand why this happens, we must identify the invisible shelf life tax. This tax manifests as a 25 to 35% food cost percentage that balloons when you overproduce for an empty shop. Because your bread expires in 24 to 72 hours, you are constantly betting on volume you cannot predict. When those loaves go unsold, your margin evaporates. The math shifts completely depending on the specific machine you choose to build. You are not merely signing a lease for a space. You are choosing the operational architecture of your future life. If you decide to go with a home-based micro-bakery, your entry point is remarkably modest, requiring only $2,000 to $10,000 to navigate cottage food laws and equipment needs. This model strips away the complexity of retail, allowing you to bypass the massive machinery of a storefront entirely. But the moment you pivot to a full retail storefront, the rules change fundamentally. You are no longer just a baker. You are a factory manager presiding over a commercial kitchen. Opening that shop requires an investment ranging from $80,000 to $350,000. You are buying a high-capacity machine that must run perfectly every single day to justify the rent, the utility load, and the specialized equipment. If you choose this path, you are not buying a hobby. You are buying a complex, high-stakes manufacturing business defined by the need for constant, predictable output. The math of your dream either anchors you or drifts you toward insolvency. You must understand exactly how much capital this machinery demands before you commit to the build-out. Before you ever pull a single sheet pan from the oven, you are staring at a massive initial outlay. That $80,000 to $350,000 startup range is the price of entry into a specialized manufacturing environment. You are building an industrial facility that happens to be open to the public. Your initial capital is being eaten alive by items that never touch a customer's hand. You will spend $1,500 to $3,500 purely on the bureaucracy of existing, the permits, the licenses, and the legal fees. Before you sell a single croissant, your bank account is already bleeding. Then comes the machinery, a full equipment setup, from the heavy-duty mixers to the industrial ovens and refrigerated display cases, commands $60,000 to $200,000 of your startup capital. The lease is the final shackle. A 1,500 square foot space can run you $900 to $6,000 per month, depending on your zip code. Most landlords will demand a deposit that effectively locks away even more of your liquid cash. By the time you factor in the physical build-out, the plumbing modifications, and the electrical upgrades for high-voltage ovens, your door price is fixed and largely non-negotiable. You have essentially front-loaded your financial risk into the physical space. The danger here is obvious. Once that money is spent on fixed assets, it is gone. You cannot pull the oven out of the wall to pay a surprise tax bill or to cover a month of slow sales. You are betting that your future revenue will cover not just your ingredients and your staff, but also the immovable weight of the capital you just sank into the walls and floor. The question that dictates whether you survive your first year is how you intend to bridge the gap between that frozen, expensive setup and your daily operating costs. You need to know how the recurring burden of debt service will hit your profit and loss statement before you even start baking. Or you will find yourself in a race against a clock you cannot see. That debt service is a physical weight that dictates your daily rhythm, forcing you to prioritize the bank over the quality of your dough. When you finance a startup setup, you are buying a high-interest timeline. You are not just baking bread. You are printing revenue specifically to satisfy the interest on equipment loans and leasehold improvements. This debt service hits your profit and loss statement on day one before you have sold your first bagel or cleared a single tray of cooling inventory. Every dollar dedicated to a monthly loan payment is a dollar you cannot reinvest in your staff, your ingredients, or your own financial buffer. You are operating on a razor-thin margin where one missed payment can trigger a cascade of defaults. If a mixer breaks or a refrigeration unit fails, you have no liquid cash to fix it because that capital is already committed to the debt that bought the machine in the first place. Most new bakery businesses take approximately 18 months to reach their break-even point, but this assumes your cash flow remains perfectly stable. With significant debt service, that point often recedes because you are fighting an uphill battle against amortization. You might believe that higher sales volume will solve this, but in a manufacturing operation with high fixed costs and a strict shelf life, more volume can actually accelerate your losses if your waste management is not perfectly locked down. You are entering a territory where you must balance the potential of your products against the crushing certainty of your overhead. You will feel the urge to bake more, to sell more, and to expand your menu to capture every possible customer. Yet, that is exactly where the trap waits. Every extra croissant baked to appease the bank that lands in the bin by closing time only makes the debt grow heavier. This leads us to the most dangerous assumption in the industry, the idea that volume is the solution for an inefficient model. This volume trap is the exact point where a passion project hits the wall of industrial reality. Because your shop produces items with a life cycle of 24 to 72 hours, increasing production does not grant you the economies of scale seen in other manufacturing sectors. Instead, it exponentially increases your exposure to the invisible shelf life tax. Your production process is not a linear path to profit. It is a high-stakes calculation of how much product you can afford to throw away. Look at the gross margin. Industry data consistently shows that bakery gross margins hit 60 to 80%. But this figure is a dangerous illusion. It calculates profit based on ingredients and packaging, completely ignoring the cost of the finished item that goes into the trash. If you produce 500 loaves to capture more revenue but only sell 400, your gross margin does not reflect those 100 loaves in the dumpster. The labor, the electricity for the ovens, and the raw materials are all sunk. This is why a streamlined menu, where you produce only what you can reliably move, is fundamentally superior to a diverse menu that forces you to hold excess stock. The wider your inventory, the harder it is to predict demand, and the more likely you are to pay for the privilege of baking bread for the trash can. Most owners realize too late that they are managing a perishable inventory that demands perfect precision. When you struggle to hit the 52-week average revenue of $325,000 to $450,000 for a small shop, you are often tempted to expand the menu to reach new customers. But every new item is a new variable in your waste equation. Once your overhead costs are combined with the daily loss of unsold inventory, your tiny net profit margin of 3 to 10% disappears entirely. The model becomes unsalvageable when the daily cost of this waste, paired with your fixed debt service, forces you to cannibalize your own capital just to keep the lights on for another month. You are locked in a cage where growth requires more inventory. More inventory guarantees more waste, and more waste eats the very liquidity you need to survive. The invisible shelf life tax functions as a hidden, rolling theft from your operating capital. Imagine you produce 100 loaves of artisan bread every morning. That inventory is your most expensive asset, yet it begins to lose its entire retail value the moment the sun sets on day 1. By day 3, if those items remain on the shelf, you have not just lost the potential profit, you have lost the total cost of the flour, water, yeast, electricity, and the labor hours used to shape, proof, and bake them. This tax compounds because your food cost percentage is being artificially inflated by every single unit you toss in the bin. You are essentially paying to manufacture trash, effectively burning your working capital to fill a dumpster. To endure the 18-month break-even period, you need that initial startup capital. But capital at the start is not the same as liquidity in the middle of month 6. You need a dedicated cash buffer, reserving significant capital per month to survive the inevitable moments where your commercial oven fails or your foot traffic unexpectedly drops. Without that liquid reserve, you are forced into a permanent defensive posture. This is where the debt service trap truly tightens. You prioritize the bank over the kitchen every single morning. You choose not to fix the walk-in refrigerator because the money for the technician is needed for the loan installment. You refuse to test new, potentially more profitable menu items because you are terrified of the waste risk associated with any unsold inventory. Your daily survival is dictated by this rigid arithmetic. You must sell enough units to cover the debt, then the fixed overhead, and only then do you see the thin margins of retail life. You cannot pivot, you cannot innovate, and you cannot afford a slow week. This is why many owners reach the end of their first 18 months, see that they have finally balanced their books, and realize that the profit left over is not enough to pay themselves a competitive annual salary. They have traded their capital, their credit, and their time for the privilege of keeping a machine running that never actually generates a surplus. When your daily revenue is merely a revolving door of costs, the dream of the shop becomes the anchor that holds you in place. You are not building an asset. You are maintaining a liability that eats your time. The collapse usually begins with a quiet, persistent drain on your cash flow. You hit the point of no return when the structural realities of your profit and loss statement finally choke your liquidity. Your fixed overhead remains an immovable burden, regardless of whether you sell 10 loaves or 200. When your labor costs average 35% of your revenue, you are effectively operating a business where the majority of your cash exits the door before you even account for your ingredients. You must maintain production volume to cover your rent, but that volume creates a surplus of perishable inventory that you cannot sell. As that unsold product enters the trash, your food cost percentage inevitably climbs past the safe range. This is the moment the machine turns against you. Every dollar you spend on labor to bake bread that ends up in the bin is a dollar you no longer have for the maintenance of your equipment. When a mixer or a refrigeration compressor eventually fails, the repair cost will be significant. But your liquid capital is already committed to your debt service, which requires a fixed payment regardless of your daily performance. You are forced to prioritize those interest payments over the health of your kitchen. The business becomes unsalvageable because the revenue you generate is being funneled into past capital, not present operations. When your daily cash flow fails to cover both the debt interest and the rising cost of waste, you lose the ability to reinvest. This leads directly to the 18th month, the period where you should be breaking even, but where many shops find they are instead structurally incapable of generating a profit. Consider a shop generating $400,000 in annual revenue. In a best-case year, you keep your food costs at 25%. That leaves $300,000 to cover everything else. Your labor claims $140,000. Now, you have $160,000 remaining. From this, you pay your 25% overhead, $100,000, and your equipment debt service, taking another $30,000. You are left with $30,000 of net profit. At 7.5%, you are performing within the standard range. But this model is a balancing act on a razor. Suppose your waste management slips. Your food cost climbs to 35%, adding $40,000 in pure waste you cannot recover. That $40,000 does not come from your margin. It comes directly out of your operating pool. Suddenly, that pool shrinks from $160,000 down to $120,000. You still have to pay your staff $140,000. You still have to pay your $100,000 in overhead. Even before you account for the debt service, you are already $120,000 underwater. Once the food cost ceiling is breached, your net profit vanishes. You are now burning cash to stay open, forced to choose which bill to defer. You cannot scale your way out of this because every additional unit sold carries the same risk of becoming waste. You are not managing a neighborhood staple. You are operating a manufacturing machine where every wasted loaf of bread is a direct hit to your survival. The ledger indicates that a retail bakery cannot sustain high profit margins when burdened by high overhead storefronts. You are locked into a net profit range of 3 to 10% because your capital is constantly fleeing into rent, specialized equipment, and debt interest. That 3% return on a high-rent shop is not a failure of your management. It is a mathematical certainty of this specific manufacturing model. You cannot escape these fixed costs. If you want a 25% profit margin, the math dictates you must choose a home-based micro-bakery model that eliminates the commercial rent and debt service, otherwise consuming your gains. If you insist on a retail storefront, you must accept that thin margin as the permanent non-negotiable cost of your choice. The dream of the bakery ends where the math begins.